So I always said that I will never grow old in a cold country. When my dad left, I was 4. I had to really get to know my parents. They put you in the lowest class in the year because I wrote my resignation letter.
You didn't face no form of racism or anything like that?
I did. And I could tell you a little story about that if I may.
When did it all start?
Well, I was born in Portland, so I was there until I was 11. I went to primary school there, kindergarten, primary school, and it's a local district area, and basically you knew your district, your surroundings, you went to school and back, and that was it really.
Friends playing outside, can you remember?
Yeah, we had a good life in terms of outdoor life. Children were safe. We just played. We went to rivers by ourselves as children. Yeah, we had a really good time. I mean, you'd be frightening now for children to go out the way we used to do. There was a neighborhood, so the community was like your family. And so we grew up in a really good neighborhood, felt very safe, and a bit of a country girl, yes.
Okay. Mom and dad have good jobs, or?
Yeah, my father managed an estate at the time. So my dad was in a good job when he lived in Jamaica, but he was involved in politics, and at a point where it became difficult or there was a change of government, then he was threatened in terms of his job and so on, so he decided to go to England. And so he went to England and he spent, I think it's about 3 years, then he came back to Jamaica. We were all here. There's 6 of us siblings in our family. Mum and dad, yeah. And so we were all here, and then he came back to Jamaica. He left when I was born, about 1.
Okay.
And then he came back when I was 3. And then he spent a little time here, got involved in politics again, and so he left again a year or so later. About a couple of years later, he left and decided to live in England, and then...
Where in England?
Manchester.
Oh, Manchester, England. Mm-hmm. Then leave all the 6 kids?
Yeah, the 6 of us was here, then he sent for my mum shortly after he came up. Went up to England, and then the 2 eldest of us then went up a year or so later.
What was your thoughts of England at the time when everybody's going up?
I didn't know anything about England. I was 11. I never had any exposure, so I didn't. I suppose we all wanted to go because our parents was there. So we were living with grandparents, who was lovely. I love my grandma. But you want to go and live with your parents, don't you? So we lived without our parents for about 5 years.
5 years.
Then they sent for the 4 remaining.
Can you remember the excitement to say you're going to England?
Yeah, well, it was excitement about seeing my parents, because I didn't really know my dad at that stage, because when my dad left, I was 4. So I didn't really know what my dad looked like, really. And my mum left when I was 6.
Alright.
So again, you know, it's after 5 years, for a 6-year-old, it fades a little bit. So it was quite exciting. Yeah, we were going to England, didn't know what to expect, but our parents was there, and that's where we wanted to be.
Okay, can you remember the day traveling?
I do, yes,
Ooh,
yes.
tell me about it, please.
Well, it was 29th of September 1972 when we left, and it was exciting. We stayed in Kingston overnight with our aunt, and then we got the plane the next day.
Yeah. On the airplane? In Jamaica? British Airways? What was it? Can you remember?
I think it was British Airways that we
British Airways.
went over on, yes.
Okay.
I think it was.
And where did the plane land?
Well, we had a stop in America, so it was in fact, I can't remember the airline. It might have been British Airways, but we stopped in America somewhere and stayed for a while. Then we got a connected flight to England.
Like overnight or something?
No. It was a few hours. So I think roughly about 4 hours-ish, and then we had a connection
Land to Manchester?
straight to Manchester.
Straight to Manchester.
From wherever we were in America. I would say New York probably.
So who came to the airport to pick you up?
Oh, everybody. I think my mum and dad, my brother and sister that was here, and about 4 friends of my parents. Yeah, so it was a bit of a few people came to meet us. Yeah.
Coming out of the airport and looking around.
Well, initially I was like freezing, of course, because it was September. And, you know, it certainly weren't winter, but for me it was freezing. And but the airport was nice and excited, you know, and of course you're all sort of shy and wanted to meet your parents and all of that. But I was a bit disappointed on my way in from the airport because things look a bit bleak and the houses were bleak, and you know, I suppose you're used to lots of colours and things like that, and you know, sort of quaint houses, but you come to this place that I don't know, we expected mansions, I suppose, big houses and all of that and everything. And I'm sure you hear the cliche, everything looked like a factory, really. Everybody says that. Well, that's the general impression we all had, really. So it was a sort of, more or less as a child, you were just wanting to get home and spend time with your family, and you know. So really, the surroundings, as much as they were not what I expected, not knowing what to expect. I was more about getting home and, you know, sort of getting to know my parents, really.
Did you have a connection with your mom and dad? Like that love you had for your grand?
Well, I had to really get to know my parents to develop that, because, you know, my grandparents, they sort of spoil you, and, you know, I had a really good life there, and I was completely spoiled. And so coming to my mum and dad, I didn't know what to expect, you know, and they probably were a bit the same because they were without us for 5 years. So they had to build a bond again. And I suppose that took a little while to happen.
So what about the other 2 sisters who came over? The 2 sisters?
They were settled and they had children and everything here by the time we got here. Yeah, because they were older, so that's why they went up first. So they were well in their teens. So they were early 20s by then, yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So it was still at home or they left home?
They had both left home.
They left home?
Yeah. Because my eldest sister, she got married quite young, about 18.
All right.
So, yeah.
All right. Let's go to school now.
Yes.
What school you went to first of all?
I went to Juicy High School in Manchester, Moorside, Manchester, yes.
Yeah. And how was school life?
Well, school was quite strange. So we went to school. I didn't start the school year because I came the end of September. So I started somewhere in the middle of October in the first year at school, as it was.
Yeah.
And that was an experience. We spoke English but with a broad Jamaican accent. So that was a bit of a novelty for the children there. So you felt a little bit ostracized because, you know, you just couldn't relate. You know, there was you come from a totally different environment and you come into this alien school that everything looks different. But I think, and when we started school, I think the teachers also didn't know how to deal with us. You know, they just didn't have the experience. And I suppose they'll give you a test And when we did that test, I was way ahead.
Wow.
Way ahead of the children who were in school. So they gave you a little English and maths test and you walk it, you know, because what they were doing when I was 11 there was things I did when I was about 7 and 8 in Jamaica. Way ahead. So they put you in the lowest class in the year, even though you walked it. I was in the lowest class in the year, and this was September, October, and then at Christmas you had a test that you do at the end of term test, and I came first in everything, including British history, which I had never done.
Wow.
So within 2 months, you know, it was like I read a book and knew about it, you know. So they put me in the middle of the year, in January, the middle of the year. And so by, I think it was summer, after the summer holiday, then they gave us another test, and I came first again in everything. And so they put me in the top band.
Okay. It takes so long to do that?
They took that time to put me in the top band. Nearly a year of school to put me in the top band, and I came first in the whole year.
Wow.
So I even had a book that I kept for my kids that I got as a present for the first year. So I came first in the whole year, first year at school. So I was.
So you have friends of that, new friends, English friends?
I have to say I struggled a little bit to make friends. I think I survived in school because I was bright.
Okay.
So, you know, whereas they would make fun and that initially about your accent and that, they couldn't touch me because I just got through what I needed to get through. And to be honest, we used to go home for lunch because it was near school, so I didn't get a lot of time to socialize with school and at that point. So I suppose the first up to third year, we had friends, you know, but still because they all form friends from primary school, don't they? So because I didn't go primary school here, it was a bit of a struggle to get into those cliques that had already existed. But I weren't too fussed, really. I think, looking back now, I think I managed quite well because I weren't too fussed about it. I was a bit of a bookworm, so I read a lot and
you call yourself like a nerd, like doesn't say that.
No, I wouldn't. No, I don't think I was a nerd. No, I wouldn't say I was a nerd. I was ambitious from young,
Okay.
and so there's a drive you had from Jamaica. You know what I mean? You have a drive because it's very competitive here in education. So I certainly went to England with that drive, I wanted to do well academically, even though there were lots of obstacles. Yeah, but I got through those.
After you go through secondary, what did you go?
Well, after secondary school, I went to college, but part of the struggle for children like me that went up to England at the time is that our parents wasn't well versed in what was going on in there in terms of academically. And although my father was a very bright man, he went to high level in school here. When he went to England, he just worked in a factory, so he never really got to know the system really well and understand how to maneuver in that system and help his children to do that.
From politics into factory work?
Yeah, this is what I mean. This is how, there was a lot of skilled people that went to England that just was never, they were never given the opportunity to get very far, and they had to work to support their families. So, they take whatever job they got. And I think you find that is a general sort of, predominantly that's what happened to most West Indian who came up at that time, no matter what qualifications they had.
What did you study in college?
I did A-levels in college initially. So I did history, economics, and sociology. So,
leaving college?
Yeah, so leaving college, I was going to go uni, but I decided to take a different route. I went to college and did an HND, Higher National Diploma in Business Studies. And so I specialized in the human resources side of that, which I always liked. So I did that in training and development. So I did business studies, which you had to cover the whole spectrum of things, but I specialised in that area, in business studies. So yeah, so I did that. And then I did my what is called now Institute of Personnel Management course, which was like the postgraduate course going into HR. So I went to Polytechnic at the time, and I did the course there.
That's in Manchester?
In Manchester. I went to Manchester Poly, and I did that, and it was like equivalent with the business studies as a degree equivalent at the time. And yes. Yeah, so
first job?
my first job was as a youth and community worker in Manchester, in Carmel Road. I used to work Carmel Road. That was my first. I used to work in different places as a student. So I worked in cafe, and my sister had a pub, and I used to work in the pub. It was the Iron Duke, famous.
Iron Duke?
Yeah, they used to own the Iron Duke. So I used to work there as a student as well. So after that, my first job was working as a youth and community worker.
What age were you then, if you can remember?
I would have been about 21-ish.
Okay, that young.
Mm-hmm. I was about 21, yeah.
What was the job like, really? What do you have to do?
It was quite fun, actually. The job was a lot of organising youths and doing lots of activities. We had some training sessions, and we used to go camping in the Lake District, which was like, sort of woodland chalet type stays, and we did all exciting things, with the youths over the summer. So so it was more around that, the evening sessions where we had pools and different types of games.
You was young yourself as well?
I was, yeah.
Managing youth at that age?
Yeah.
How long did you stay there at Carmel Road?
A couple of years, 2 years.
Mm-hmm. From there to?
From there, I got a job at Greater Manchester Council, which was in the middle of Piccadilly there. And I was a women's development officer at the time. A new unit was set up there where they were looking at equal opportunities, just new, and they got different officers, but I used to look at women's development. So
explain what you have to do.
As part of that? Well, part of that because it was completely new. It was a new unit that was set up in the council, partly to regulate fairness in the council, and also to look at how development opportunities for women to help them break through the glass ceiling. So some of that, it was around about that, very new at the time, very new. So I came in at a time where we were like looking at policies and procedures, and there was some government directive that we were putting in place in organisation, in local government organisations. So I was part of developing some of that.
Coming to England, you didn't face no form of racism or anything like that?
I did. Well, you never asked me that. I think I said the first example, if you think about it, of racism was when I started school. They put me in the bottom of the class, albeit that I did very well in the entrance exam that they gave us. So, so that was the first thing. And it took me a year to get to the top when I was first in everything, every time, every test, So and because of that, I think some of my classmates was a little bit intimidated, because obviously, I'm new, I come in and, I don't need them, so to speak. And even at that age, there might have been a little bit of arrogance, I don't know, because I had to be confident even at that age. So they were experiences in school, but you see, even though the prejudice was there and it started there, I find that if you were bright and you stuck to the rules, you were well behaved, and you get on with your work, then they almost leave you alone in a sense. So from that perspective, I didn't have a lot of problem in school in terms of racism. Once they find that they couldn't hold me back, there's no way they could hold me back, then I think the other part in school, which I thought that, they pigeonholed you into certain subjects and so on. So you were pigeonholed quite often, and because I was in the top class, there were certain things, albeit that some people were pigeonholed into doing gardening and things like that. Because I was in the top class, there was a set curriculum that we all had to follow. So, which means that I had to be given the opportunities to do what the other students at that level were doing. So, in that sense, it meant that it was almost forced that I went through the same process as everybody else. And I sometimes, and I could tell you a little story about that if I may, because when I was a youth and community worker and I applied for that job, I never heard anything from the job. So it's not like now you get something back on email or whatever. So I never heard, so I didn't think anything of it. And then one day I was at home in my flat, I was off, and the doorbell went, and I answered. I just came out of the shower, my head wrapped in towel and whatever. And then there was an intercom, because I was on a first floor flat. So I asked who it was, and they said it was a GMC officer. Now I thought it was the police, So I thought, GMC officer? And I said, well, I sort of inquired, what is it, And he goes, well, I would like to talk to you. So I said, well, yeah, sort of thing. And he goes, well, you apply for a job at the Greater Manchester Council and I'm one of their officers. And I thought, oh, so of course. I said, well, I'll just give me a minute, and I put something on, And I thought, well, it's not the best look, but, I'm going to let you in because I want this job. And so I let him in, and he came in just to look at who I was.
Wow. Wow.
Can you imagine these days? So he actually came to talk with me.
Yeah.
Well, that is me saying he came to look at who I was, because he came in and I think he was like a pre-interview.
Wow.
That could never happen now, but that's how it was. And so he gave me talked to me and must see that I could speak back and whatever. So the interesting thing was then he then told me that I was shortlisted for the job. After he told me I was shortlisted for the job. And so when I went for the job, because I applied for a job, I remember at the time, because it was a few years now, it was about 9,000 or 10,000 a year at the time, which was a good wages at the time. It was a job at that level. So it was for like an administrative post for the unit that I went in eventually. So I went for the interview, and it was the same chap and the personnel lady, head of personnel, and somebody, I think it was 2 or 3 of them there at the time. So we had the interview, and then at the end of the interview they said, the job you applied for is gone. I thought, so why am I here? But we want to give you the manager's job. I don't know how that happened. So I got a job that doubled. So my first job, I was about 18,000 a year, which was a good thing at that time. 23, 24, about 23.
That's good money that day.
Yeah. So I was pleased about that, but I was in post for 9 months, and then they abolished. The abolition of the Greater Council, Manchester Council, and Greater London Council. It was abolished, so I was transferred to Oldham, and where I take up a similar post in Oldham, and I worked in Oldham for 2 years. And I decided to buy a house in Oldham. At that time I decided to leave my flat, because what I was paying for that I could pay a mortgage at the time. So I then bought a house in Oldham, and I lived there whilst I worked in Oldham. And I was there for a couple of years. till I had my first son. I had my son when I took maternity leave from Oldham, and I had my son.
I like to fast people visit. How did you meet your husband, your son?
Well, when I was a youth and community worker, I met him there.
Working as
And
well?
he was working. He was one of the workers there, so we met there. We were together from then.
One thing led to another.
One thing led to another, yes. And when I had my first son, we weren't married, but we were living together at the time. And so I took maternity leave, and then I had to go back for 3 months. Then whilst I was on mat leave, I applied for a job in Manchester City Council in the Direct Works Department as their head of personnel and training. And again, this was a job that was way above what I was on at the time. And so I thought, so when I applied for the job, I got an interview for it, which shocked me really.
Wow.
I'm like that though. I'm like, I'm going for what I see, and I'm like what they say men do. If you don't fill all the criteria, you still apply for the job. So I did, and I got an interview for that. So I went and did my 3 months, and then I went for the interview, and there was 9 people on the panel. And I was a bit shocked when I saw everybody, and but I thought, well, nobody here knows me, so I'll just go in there and do my best. So I did, and then I left and got a phone call to say I got the job, and that doubled my salary again. So I was doing okay.
Tell me here. Let's go back to the year. In what, 19 what?
Well, when was this now? Let me see. Would have been about 87-ish.
I'm doing maths, I'm going up near to 40 grand.
Yeah, so
In those times,
yeah.
that's some good money. If you come out, that's a decent amount.
Wow. So I was on,
Well, you're married?
I was on 30 something
No
grand.
matter what, if it's 20,
I was on, I was on about 37 or something like that, if I recall rightly at the time. Yeah, and by then whilst I was there, I got married because I got pregnant with my daughter. I planned my kids. I don't have any accident. So yes, so so we got married. Yeah, and I had my daughter then. Took mat leave, and then whilst I was at mat leave again, I came back to work for a bit, and then I sort of got fed up. So it was interesting because I saw a job in the hospital, and this was for a post for Opportunity 2000. It's going back to developing women. It was at a time in the NHS when there was more women, but women weren't getting to top positions. So they want somebody to come in and help in the NHS, and this was applied. And I saw the job for the head of that. It was like a project, it was something new the government had put in place, and they want somebody to drive it for the hospital. So I applied for that, and I got that because I wanted to leave the council. So I got the job, and then it's funny because I wrote my resignation letter, and I bought it, I put it in the tray, like internal thing that you had, internal mail at the time, and then as I posted it, the council decided to give redundancies. And so I heard that the same morning I put my letter, so I ran upstairs to the director's office, and I asked the secretary, is this letter gone in yet? Has the letter's gone? And she said, no, he's not looked at it. So I said, I sent a letter up and I want to retrieve it. So I went and I got my letter back. And I applied for redundancy because I got this job now. So I applied for redundancy, and I got the job in. And that was more like just a little bit more sideways move because I wanted to get out the council, so I sort of took that. Yeah, so.
Seemed like life been too smooth though. It got to be some obstacle in your way. You fly right through to all these jobs and that.
No, I mean, In terms of, at that time, I was fine. No, I got the jobs I applied for. I paced myself a little bit, but I got the jobs that I applied for. And then after 2 years of that job, because I got a gym built, I got a nursery built, and I got, holiday pay scheme in place. I did put training in place. I did a lot of policies and procedure. So all of that was part of that role and remit. So after that, then, that was exhausted, I think. So I decided to go into HR. So I applied for, they had HR roles there, so I applied for one of their senior HR officers role. And I got that. No, I did. I got that. And then I was in the role for about 2 years. And then there was a secondment for a deputy director of human resources. So I did. I got the secondment. No, I got the secondment. So I went back to, and I was there for a while, another year or so, and then the deputy director of HR came up there, and I got that. So I applied for that, and I got the deputy director there. Right? I was there, deputy director, for about a couple of years, and I had a really good director of HR there, and he really pushed me and he encouraged me, and I learned a lot from him at the time. So yeah, so then and that was like what was called, so the hospitals are like, then you have two sides to the NHS. So you got the provider side, which is the hospital, and you got the primary care side, which is like the commissioning side. So I had work in the commissioning side. So I thought, I saw a job as director of HR for advertised. So I applied for that and I got that. So I got the director of HR job. So I got my director's job. That was my aim. Yeah. My aim was to get a director's position in the NHS.
That was your last job then?
So that was my, at that time, I got the director of HR. And after a year and a half, nearly 2 years, they abolished the PCTs.
Okay.
Do you remember? They abolished the PCTs. So I went for a few jobs. I didn't get them. Because that's where racism come in, because there was a lot of people in the system now who were without jobs. So, you're not going to be picked, there's a lot of politics with a small p goes on there. So I went for one job that I thought I got. And then, because it was two of us that went for it from, different directors that went for that job. And you had to do a big interview with all the managers in this trust. And so they interviewed like an open interview, and they asked you questions, you respond to them and so on. And then you have the formal interview, and they all score, the managers would score you and so on. So they didn't give me the job, they gave it to the next woman. And then one of the managers that worked at that was the wife of one of the directors where I used to work. He was the director of operations. So he said to me, and we were friends, he said to me, my wife said to me, when is starting? Right? And I said, what do you mean? She said, because you were scored far above the other lady in that meeting. So she was shocked when I told her you didn't get the job, because they scored me higher. So I know discrimination happened there again.
So that white lady got the job?
White lady who got the job, yeah. So, so that happened. Oh, fair enough. And then I was, they had what was the primary care groups was formed then. So I got like an associate director, because they didn't have a director's position. So I got associate director at the same level and everything. So I took that role, and I was in it for a couple of years, and then they were giving redundancy, and I decided to take it because I thought, I took I took the risk. I still had a mortgage, I still had all of that, but I thought, well, let me take the redundancy and see what happens. And then when I took redundancy then, I decided to have a look to see what I want to do with my life, where do I want to go here? So I took three months off. So I took 3 months off, came to Jamaica, had a look around, bought some land, and then, I went back, bought the land, I thought, I'm going to build on this at some point. And so I went back to England and started applying for jobs again now. So I applied for a job in Alder Hey Hospital in Liverpool, and it was I think it was like a deputy or some senior HR thing, because I thought I'm not really looking for a job at the same level. I weren't bothered really, and so I didn't get that job for whatever reason, which I thought was a bit strange, but you know, I would. And then I saw one at the so, you know, sometimes things are not for you, is it? And something better is coming up. So I saw one at I went down, the lady invited me down for a pre-interview, a bit like sussing me out again. I thought, here we go again, I'm being sussed out. And so it was a nice lady though, and she and her deputy sort of talked to me forever, and then I thought maybe it's just a little interview and then I'll get the job after that. But I didn't. I had to go back for a full interview with the managers and everybody there. So I went for this interview, but I got that job. And that was like what they used to call, is it like a partnership, HR partner? That was, again, not at the level I was at. But then I was in that job for about a year. I was covering mat leave, that's what it was. The lady was on mat leave, so I had that job for a year. And after the year, the director wanted me to stay. And we all got, it was a really nice place to work, and the director was lovely.
Where were you living in?
I was living in Manchester.
And driving to Liverpool?
And drive to Liverpool. It's only 40 minutes drive on the motorway, isn't it?
Okay.
So I weren't fussed. So I stayed there, and then after a year, I got back a deputy director's position. Yeah, I was back to where I was and more. So by the time I left there, I was on a very good salary. I can't tell you on here.
Yeah, I don't So how long did you stay there?
4 years. And then that's where I left from and come to Jamaica.
All right.
I am extremely happy here. I wouldn't mind going in politics in Jamaica. I don't cook hardly. I cook, you know, if I have to, but I don't have to cook. I've been quite safe and protected, and I have never felt vulnerable. Local place like Smokehouse that has a band on a Friday night. I'm not putting England down in any way, but I am an island girl.